So good afternoon, and it is the afternoon, at least here on the East Coast, and I don't know where everybody is joining us today, but I'm Rob Grimes with the IFBTA, and I'm very happy to put on one of our special webinars today with Mako Networks, Jon Kelly, and also David Roberts with Cici's Pizza. And today we're going to be having a conversation, as we always do, about how would we modernize the current QSR experience. And we're going to take a look at the technology and security and how both groups have worked together. So welcome to our webinar today, and Jon and David. And I just thought, I don't want to take your space of giving your own introduction, so perhaps you'll go ahead and do that, and we can go ahead and kick off the conversation.
Sure, happy to start. I'm Jon Kelly. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer with Mako Networks. We provide high-performance, high-security networking solutions tailored specifically for the needs of distributed retail. Very happy to be here. We're a proud member of IFBTA, and we are a proud vendor of Cici's Pizza, and happy to be talking with Rob, you, and David, you today.
David?
Yeah, so David Roberts, I'm the CIO for Cici's Pizza Enterprises, which is a buffet pizza concept in about 30 states. We also do our own supply and distribution. Been with the company about 7 years, and look forward to this conversation today.
Boy, I bet technology's changed a lot in the last 7 years since you've been there. And not technology alone, but also the industry, right?
The industry, most definitely, especially in the last, I would say, last 5 years.
And that word digital seems to come up quite a bit today. And it seems like everything has become more and more digital up in the cloud. And I bet that's really created the whole relationship and really what brought you and Mako together.
Yeah, so you make a good point. You know, having a partner like Mako, the network and infrastructure is the core to how your restaurant technology works, right? And when I came into the organization, I believe we had just signed an agreement with Mako, so I actually came into it. But what it was then and what it is today is vastly different, and there's a lot of reasons for that, right? Like you said, moving so fast into this digital era and through our digital transformation, you've got to figure out you're answering a lot of different questions than you were back in, say, 2018 when I joined this company, right? It's back then it's how do you just operate the POS, right? How can you keep things connected, make sure those printers are working, those types of things, where you're looking at a whole different ball of wax nowadays. And it's really, how do you find that right partner that's going to partner with you both physically and strategically, right? And it's been really important for us, over the time. I want to go back about 5 years, 4.5 years ago, probably just post COVID. Uh, we were working on, we had to take a hard look at, how we were operating as a restaurant company, and especially in the digital space, right, in the online space, and as well as what was the look and feel of our restaurants moving forward. And so we took the approach of we needed to go with a different type of POS system. But not only did we need to do that for one purpose, we wanted a unified look at the data, right? And two, close to real time insights. Three, we needed a reliable network that had the tools to get us there. And without going into too much detail, because we'll obviously have a great opportunity through the rest of this call, but all of those things were a big part of building what we have today, and working with the team, Jon's team over at Mako Networks, Jason, Simon, Todd, all those guys that have been there for a long time, and done such a great job. But, those challenges are hard.
Boy, Jason, Simon, and Todd got a global shout out here, so that's great. Hey, Jon, I mean, clearly, you guys, see what's going on in the industry, not just this industry, but other industries as well that are very much aligned. And where have you seen that digital transformation change and the needs? Everybody uses the word partnership, and it is a partnership, but on the other hand, somebody's got to stay on top of all this. So where have you seen, is this story very common?
Totally. I mean, if you look back 10 years ago, the average retail store, whether it's a restaurant, a convenience store, whatever it may be, had, about 5 internet connected devices, to David's point, typically around payment processing, right? So you could do credit card transactions. That number has jumped up dramatically. It's now somewhere in the range of 25 to 30, and it's expected to continue to increase. And in 5 years' time, there are probably going to be more like 50 devices that are internet connected inside these retail operations. That's everything from, your payment to your CCTV to your, cooling system, your thermostats. I mean, Wi-Fi, all of it's online these days. And what that creates is a huge management challenge. You need to have everything connected. It needs to be reliable. It needs to be secure. And needs to be something that you can wrap your arms around without having to kind of daisy chain together all these different vendors and solutions and whatnot. And so it's a challenge. It's also an opportunity to kind of do some spring cleaning and centralize the way that you do things. It's been great, from our perspective, as someone that can provide a foundational networking layer that unlocks connectivity for lots of different tools and systems. We've seen an increasing preference for centralized managements of these sorts of systems, but it's something that's well underway already and only continuing to accelerate as the experience for customers, employees, and anyone that's entering these retail locations continues to be more and more digitally enabled, even in the physical world.
So, Jon, I don't know if you realize how many subjects you just threw out there. So, David, I'm going to try my best to put this out there, not necessarily in the order he gave, but here's what I heard. I heard, first of all, connected operations and all the equipment. People always forget that, and even down to, pizza ovens, and fryers and things like that are all connected today. So there's a lot more going through that pipe to be secure. The second piece is all of the different applications that are out there, because I did hear you start with payments. Sure, everybody got scared into payments originally because we were worried about, breaches and all, and the data security, but it really is more than that. It's, as you now said, employees, loyalty, data, and all this other information is flowing. And so you've got staff, you've got employees, and then you got all the new applications that all now need to be secure that we didn't even have before. So I don't know, David, where you want to start with this one, but he just threw out a bunch.
Sure. Well, so the way I was looking at it is connectivity, right? Connectivity is the main word I use for how all the things can talk with each other, but it starts with the network, right? And with Mako, again, dating back 4 or 5 years ago, spending a lot of time before we rolled out a unified POS, we had to focus on, all right, how do we ensure that this is the right tool for us moving forward when we were going to deploy this system to all 300 restaurants that we had? And thinking through that, connectivity is the first thing, because if you're not up and available, you're dead. Especially for a restaurant company like us at the time, that was close to 90% in store buffet concept, right? So they got to be able to operate all the time, or cash, a cash box at the front counter just doesn't work anymore, right? Like it used to, and they were able to utilize that. And when I say that, it's from a security standpoint, right? And so that was one of the first things that I worked on, with the guys at Mako, was how do we, first of all, what kind of infrastructure, what kind of equipment do they have? What is the level of, the level of compliance, the ability to make policy, all of these things, and I'm going to get a little bit technical because I think it's important to understand the technical side of, why we chose their solution, right? And when you go into the whys, it goes from a PCI standpoint, right? And like you said, it's not just the payment devices, but it's the movement of data throughout the network. And what does that look like? And so we used to have multiple vendors within our restaurant, and we still would today if it made the most sense. But we had the opportunity to really go back to the drawing board and work with Mako to figure out, one, what tools do they offer? And then really go through with a fine tooth comb, each area to figure out if that was a solution that could work with us. And what we found, it took a little while and a lot of work, but what we found is that through, setup configuration, through the different tools that they have available, from firewalls to routers to switches to access points, it really came down to they had the right solution for us. And one of the opportunities you have, and this was obviously a big indicator for us that we could get where we wanted to go, because I always have the supportability factor at the front of my mind, because you have these help desk and your teams that constantly need to field these calls from these franchisees. They need to be able to get them troubleshoot the issue effectively, and then resolve it and let them go back in our from our standpoint to selling pizzas, what they're good at, and having that great guest experience, right? And in order to do that, you need certain things in place. Connectivity. Well, you need redundant connectivity. How could they solve our redundant connectivity issues, right? We need maximum uptime. We need 99% availability. And one way we did that with Mako was working on a solution of, they had a leading edge firewall at the time, and but with that had a cell backup as a additional add-on to create that level of redundancy. Some then you work through the issues of, okay, well, not everybody, we're in 30 states, not everybody's going to have great connectivity. How do we solve those things? And those are more of implementation type challenges that we work through as well, right? Whether it's, putting different cell antennas on the box, or heck, putting them outside of a wall, because of the way the structure's built. All of these different challenges that every restaurant company faces, from a connectivity standpoint. And we came to a really solid solution, to make sure that, and to this day, it's still the solution we implemented 4 years ago. So
but
I think it might be working.
I just want to clarify something that you said. And by the way, I should have mentioned at the top of this that if people are listening, I'm not the only one who may have some questions and clarification here. They should certainly put those in the chat down at the Q&A at the bottom of their screen, and we'll see those, and we'll tee those up. But I'm sort of curious, you were talking about you were talking about the different pieces that were going in, and you're talking about the franchisees. But did I hear you say that as you were also evaluating new technologies, that you were bringing in Mako's expertise to take a look and evaluate those technologies as to how they would actually fit in the stack?
Oh, 100%. Because to me, some of the best relationships you have are the ones you currently have, right? I mean, the partnerships. And so I'm not big on having 20 different partners. I don't think it's as effective as having just a few partners, because then you really become they really become an extension of your team, right? And when they become an extension of your team, then you bring them in, or they bring you in with latest technology trends or things that they've got, opportunities for us to look at. And they don't always work, and they're not always something that we're going to adopt. For example, they've had those VoIP services for quite some time, but we were doing something totally different that was working for us, and only till I think at the beginning of this year did we adopt their VoIP services because it made sense, right? Love Mako to death, but I've got to do what's best for Cicis, right? But if they have an opportunity, then you should look at it, but it's not necessarily something you're going to adopt right away.
But you're really actually looking. So, Jon, I'm curious because I got to tell you, I'm having an aha moment here because I don't normally hear people talk about. I think what you just did, David, is you just teed up for us that the whole environment has changed and that we may actually be looking at that backbone and how we do that data and the collection and the networks and things as importantly as we look at the functions and features of what we're putting in. Jon, is that pretty much a standard thing? Do you get called in like that, or is this something sort of a new change and a new direction that people ought to be and are thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, the way that we think about it is, I'm not sure, you may have heard of this concept of the hierarchy of needs. It's like a business school concept or whatever, where, there's a foundational layer of for human beings, they need to eat and sleep, and then they need to have, family and friends, and then
You're taking me back to college, okay?
Exactly, yeah. So it's this hierarchical thing that Maslow, exactly. And you can't get to the top of the pyramid unless you've got you can't achieve self-fulfillment unless you've got food and drink, right? So you got to get those basics taken care of. The reason I bring that up is because we apply kind of a similar concept to the way we think about technology in, these retail applications. The foundational layer that everyone needs to focus on first and foremost is keeping the lights on, right? You have to have that base layer of connectivity, and that's where we play. And so, we focus there. Once you've got the base layer of kind of keeping the lights on, you need to make sure you're doing so cost effectively. It's one way to keep the lights on by, calling in emergency dispatches to fix things at the last minute. Sure, it can keep the lights on, but it's not very cost effective. It's better to have something that's more, reliable. But only once you've kind of got that to a point where you have reliability of your connection, it's cost effective and lean, then you can start to think about, okay, what are the things that we want to do to innovate and add value to our customers and add value to our employees and so on and so forth. And what we're finding is that because we can provide a cost effective and reliable base, we can have those conversations with our customers about what are the solutions that you want to deploy at your store? How can we enable you to do that with reliable and secure connectivity really easily? So we love having those conversations, and we have a big ecosystem of partners that we integrate with kind of out of the box,
Right.
because we start to see this happening more and more where, yeah, David, you might not want to have 40 vendors in your store, but there are some that you want to use, and we see that in your similar applications in other sorts of restaurant environments and so on and so forth. So we partner up with people that we see being used commonly, and that just allows the operator to say, okay, these are the technology choices I want to make, turn them on, let me get back to cooking pizza, right?
But you know what? The when we talk to people from the IFBTA and we talk to them about how to select systems and look at things, we might say to them, go look at who your current partners are, usually meaning the back office applications, the point of sale. Go on their website, take a look and see who their partners are. And, why do you want to recreate things? But you're like the air, you said keeping the lights on, right? I think of the pilot light. You're the pilot light that's,
Yeah.
keeping the ovens going here. And I bet you that people don't necessarily always think about doing that. Now, let's assume the sale is made. You got the customer, you have CCs. So how are you using the data and the information that you're getting to give insights proactively, not in a sales thing, but to manage better? Because I'm sure David doesn't have unlimited resources here. So to manage better, how do you team up and do that? And what are you looking for to enhance, your service with the customer?
Well, ultimately, it comes down to what the customer is looking for. We need to kind of try to synthesize feedback from our customers and skate to where the puck is going to be, and predict what their needs are going to be further down the road. But, a lot of what we try to do is, we are not the specialist in absolutely everything. We're the specialist in networking, and we can give all the alerts and the data analysis and insights on, what's your uptime like, and where are you failing over to cellular, and what's the, all this stuff around kind of uptime and reliability. But we are a good kind of data clearinghouse. And so if you need certain information to come through your network and go to a specialized third-party software vendor that's going to give you deep analysis of what's happening with your, ovens or fridges or CCTV or whatever. We make that happen, even though we're not necessarily, the one crunching the numbers. We just make sure that the numbers get to where they need to go directly from your store securely and reliably, so that then these specialized, third parties can come in and actually provide all of that. So we're more of the plumbing, if you will, than necessarily the expert on all of the, the end points of your data.
So are there some aha moments, David, that came out for you in your conversations and working with Mako that you just might not have thought about, but because you had this partnership and they were bringing these things to you, that you actually made changes in how you did your business?
Oh, 100%. It was a big part of when we rolled out. The first thing you've got to do is put together your support structure and what that's going to look like. And having them, work side by side, my support team, we were able to create a lot of standardization process. One of the big things when you're doing implementations and rollouts, let's talk about that for a second, because it is, everybody's constantly doing that, at least every couple of years. And one of the biggest challenges is standardization, and consistency, right? And when we're talking about standardization and consistency, is what is that onboarding process? What does the ordering process look like? How do we make sure things, are ordered this day, shipped this day, received this day? Lots of coordination, right? And that takes an army, right? And when you have that, but the thing is, for me, like you said, small teams can't handle all the heavy lifting, right? We have to have reliable partners that can be extensions of us, that can handle stuff the way we would handle it ourselves. Because our end game is to make sure that these systems get deployed, that they're not disruptive, that they add to the value of the franchisee and the restaurants to enable them to sell their pieces, to serve those guests, to create new experiences, better experiences, seamless experiences.
So am I allowed to throw in the word franchisees into this? Because I don't want to overlook this, but not all franchisees are sophisticated. You're leading the way. You did say in your description that you went to a standardized, consistent, at least point of sale in there, but not everybody has that luxury of doing that. So when you add that complexity of franchisees into the mix, where are those, pain points, or where are the challenges, or what is it that you think people might not consider that you've now been through?
So there has to, there's constant give and take, and every restaurant company set up differently. If you're talking from the CIO perspective, it's making sure that you have very clear verbiage in your FDDs of how you want to operate your business. And then, and like I said, 2018, we were not the picture of health, right? And by that I mean we had 6 or 7 different POS systems. My team only supported, I want to say, 60% of the system, because the other 40% dealt directly with whoever they were working with from a network, from a POS perspective. And then how do you put together that presentation, or to say, hey, here's really what we're looking to go to. And because if you're a franchisee and you've been in a system a long time, you've gone through lots of changes, heard lots of coach speak, oh yeah, this last one tried it, this one tried it, this one tried it, they all failed. So it's not lost on me that what we were able to accomplish, but it was only a result of my team and the partnerships that we have, like with Mako and with our other vendors, that we were able to get there. And the result of that is a much more buttoned up process from soup to nuts, from a security standpoint, which is number one for us. Security and compliance. Mako I had to make sure that they had all their attestations of compliance, because what we do when we rolled out one single POS and network. When I say we rolled out POS, we rolled out the whole store infrastructure, from cabling to network to routers to switches to APs to POS terminals, digital menu boards. We did it all from one fell swoop, right? And when you're doing that, there's a lot of things to consider. So the planning is the biggest part of it, and then the implementation is the biggest
And
challenge.
you can't look in a silo at one system or another, even if you have to add something later, because they all impact each other. They're all connected together, and even that data is, really flowing between them, as well. I suspect, Jon, that the franchisee environment, not everybody. Well, first of all, what I just got out of this is that David's earned the trust. His group has earned the trust of the franchisees, because I can tell you there are a lot of groups where there's some real question as to who's running IT and what goes on there. Sometimes there's two CIOs, one in ops and one in IT. So, what are those challenges, Jon, that you see from your side, whether it's licenses, franchises, management companies, in that, what are the challenges that you see there? And is there some advice that you would give people going into this if they were chatting with you about how you might approach that?
I think that these different layers that you're talking about create complexity, right? Sort of by definition. I think that, when it comes to connectivity and networking, you just pure and simple need reliability. I think that should be the kind of, primary focus is like, hey, we got to, like I said, keep the lights on all the time. So you have to make sure that you're kind of building from a solid foundation there. When you get into, different, layers and different levels of sophistication, I think it's important to have sort of a role-based level of visibility and access into IT, because in some cases a franchisee may say, I actually have 10 stores, and we have our own IT department, and we've got someone that can kind of manage
They may
this.
have other brands.
They may have other brands. Yeah, exactly. So they may have hundreds of stores, and their own, sort of sophisticated way of managing things. And so being able to give them the tools that they want or need, while still maintaining that solid foundation that complies with PCI and all the other things that David was kind of talking about, I think is critical. But then, offering the flexibility so that they can choose to dip in and manage it if they have the skills and the capabilities and the interest in doing it. But, you can also lock it down if you feel like it's not something. And that's an area that we have a lot of experience with. So Mako sort of grew up in the petroleum and convenience store industry. And so we would have an agreement with a major brand like a Sunoco or a Chevron or a BP, and then all of their individual store owners, whether they own one or 1,000 of those branded locations, has a different range of sophistication in terms of how they manage IT. So we've seen it in different verticals, where you kind of need to offer the tools that they can step in and choose to kind of co-manage something with you, or leave it, in somebody else's hands. But again, it comes back to making sure that the foundation's reliable and the integration capabilities are there as well.
Yeah, so between the two of you, you both have touched on something which I would call new points of service or new opportunities for selling what we do, right? So I don't know, David, if Cici is going to head down the pizza vending machine route, but there are fresh pizzas being made out of vending machines, which is a new location. But convenience stores, what do they sell? Pizza, chicken, hot dogs on rollers, but they're changing because they want fresh foods in there. And so I'm sure that there's some learnings that come from C-stores and gas pumps that are the integration between the two, that these industries are coming together. And then, so it's really both of you are, going to see expansion and overlap in the various industries that you're working in.
Yeah, and I don't know if that was for me or Jon, as you're talking about
Either
this
one.
stores, and they can probably speak a little bit more to that. I don't I don't see a pizza vending machine in our near future anywhere. From a CC standpoint, it's a little tougher to run a buffet concept from a vending machine, but I do find it interesting. A friend of mine sent me a text, and he was in Tahiti, I guess, last week, and when he landed, there was, like you said, there was a pizza vending machine, and he was laughing. He goes, "I wonder if there's somebody in there."
Throw the dough.
Right.
Yeah, but you know what? They're coming. Never's a long time. So it might not be in the immediate future, but they're certainly, we don't know where those new points
That's
of service are going to be, right?
very much so.
So there is a lot of opportunity. I'm sort of wondering though, you know, what you're thinking about, David, for the future, there must be some things on your list that you believe are going to come up, and it doesn't have to be the pizza vending machine, but certainly in the next 12 to 18 months, you're planning your roadmap. There's going to be changes, not only that you see for pizza, for Cici's, but also what you see in the industry in general. What forward thinking, what are the things you're actually starting to think about that are top of mind that you're thinking, hey, maybe this is going to happen, or, there's going to be a discussion one day and you guys are going to need to be ready for?
Well, there's already been the discussion, right? And it's really around our guest experience, and how's that changing? How's that evolving? How are we getting ahead of it to create that great customer interaction? And how do we maintain that? And then how do we repeat it? And a lot of that has to do with, you get back to, well, okay, now we've got that baseline infrastructure set up. Now what are we doing with these applications and our guests to optimize their experience? So we're looking at it from several different viewpoints, right? So one, we're looking at it from the guest survey or the guest interaction, guest feedback application, what we have called CC's Listens. And I want to preface this when I start to talk about these different applications that we're looking at or that we're implementing, and say that every vendor partner we look at what they do, what can they solve, but how can we leverage, what else can we leverage that we're not looking at today, right? And that's a big part of whether it's a relationship with Mako, whether it's a relationship with our POS or our guest feedback or our loyalty, all of those different things, they have a core purpose that they solve, but they also have these ancillary areas that they work in. And it's important to me, one of the biggest things I do when bringing on a vendor after the security and risk assessment, right? Because that's obviously a number one and one B for us is, okay, once we've narrowed down who can solve our problem or who can help us get to where we need to be, is what other opportunities, and specifically AI and machine learning, because as a small staff, uh, you're very sensitive to cost, right? Because one, if you're a franchisor like us, a lot of that gets passed on. You are there to marshal in, and but you're supposed to have the best interests of your franchisee or our corporate stores at heart. And by doing that, then you just can't layer on cost after cost after cost. So to get back to your question about what are we doing from a digitization standpoint, well, we're doing it very strategically, and we're kind of picking our spots with cost and security in mind, but with the best, with the best opportunities for the guest. So some core things that we're really concentrating on is the guest experience. And you know 3 4 years ago, actually it was about 5 years ago, we totally scrapped our mobile application, and we totally scrapped our loyalty. We hung it up because it was not serving the purpose. It was not helping our guests. It was a tough redemption tool. It just didn't work. And then our mobile app wasn't really doing anything, you know, beyond the basic ordering, right? And that's not what we wanted that to look like for us. And so we partnered with some great vendors. We're actually in pilot for our loyalty and our new mobile app right now. We started the pilot about 2 months ago. We roll out in 3 weeks. So we're really excited about that. But none of this would be possible if we didn't have what we have in our restaurants today, right? And so getting these different pieces of the puzzle to fit nicely together, where your guest doesn't get impacted by it, but gets the benefit of it, right? And so what I'm like, and this might be a surprise to Jon because I haven't really said anything to them, but I'm all about issuing challenges because that's what I get every day. Is how can we interact with those guests in our restaurants with that from that mobile solution, right? They're coming in. We know they're in the restaurant. They just ordered food. We've got their loyalty number. They've got the mobile app up. we can see it on the network because they've connected to our Wi-Fi. How are we gonna capitalize on that?
Hey,
I
John, I think that is a question for you, and I bet you there is also an answer in there, maybe drawing on some of your retail experience where they're doing, the geolocation and they're identifying the people as well.
Totally, challenge accepted, David. No, I think it's true. What we are seeing is a lot of this, right? The loyalty in the apps and all of that. To David's point, it matters what you have in the store when you start to have these, online interactions with the store as well, because you can't have someone place an order through a mobile app and then not have that order show up in the kitchen in the store, right? You still need all of that connectivity and reliability. So I think, that's a important part of it. And yeah, we
Coupled on top of delivery services and outsourced third parties and things, right? Because it's not just all within our own ecosystem.
Exactly. But I think, one of the things I actually have a question, kind of back to you, David, because you talked a lot about what in your response just there about the guest experience, right? You said cost, security, but the guest is really one of the pillars that you think about from an IT standpoint. I was having a conversation with somebody recently who's in the QSR environment. She's the head of marketing for a chain of restaurants, and IT reports into marketing in that organization. And I said, that's kind of interesting. Like, why is that the way that you do it? And she said, well, everything we do is about our brand and about our guest, including all the digital stuff that we put into the store. And so for that reason, we have to we think about IT with respect to everything we do from a marketing standpoint: loyalty, app, this, that, the other. I was curious, is this just at Cici's something that inherently you and the marketing department are on the same page, or have you structured your organization in a way that there is kind of constant dialogue and feedback, or are you just particularly guest conscious as an IT lead?
Yes, would be right. No, marketing and IT have to work together very closely, especially in the hospitality space, right? I mean, they go hand in hand. You shouldn't see a difference between the one and the two, right? I do find that interesting what you said as far as how they roll their IT and the marketing, but you know, the way we partner is, pretty well. Um, the way we've structured it over the last few years is, your first intake to any type of uh, relationship or venture into a solution is in those introductory conversations. The first reason I'm there sitting next to Maria, our CMO, is from a security standpoint. First and foremost, security and compliance, right? Because if I can't help them and ensure that the solution that we're looking to take on has that level of security and compliance that we require, then it's a waste of time for her to go down the road, right? And a lot of people run into that because years before in other organizations that don't have that set up, and it took us some learnings to get there, but people who don't have that setup, you find later the risk, right? And then you get into the areas of whether it's a PCI risk or whether, like Rob mentioned earlier, data breaches and things like that. And, those are very real things. And it's not if, but when, and then it becomes how do you respond, right? But if you can mitigate 95% of that risk by being at those introductory conversations and partnering with them, because not only you're specific, the first thing I'm there for is security, but the second thing I'm there is for application of the technology, right? And does it help meet the business needs? Because any vendors could tell, somebody that's not specifically tech, that has the tech background, say a CIO has, or somebody in the IT department has sitting next to them, then they truly don't know if they're getting a full solve of their problem. They may know, here are all the bells and whistles, and here's your end result that you're going to get, and we're going to, give you this great portal and these great dashboards, and we're going to give you all these sales metrics and data analytics. But how do you get there, right? And you have to work tightly with marketing because we know how you get there, and it's also learning for us too, because we also learn the other side of the business with marketing of, okay, because their objective and their goals are much different than ours, in many areas, but in some areas are the same, is rolling out a solution like loyalty that's both effective but solves our current needs as well as forward thinking from a roadmap perspective. Does this will this allow us to for that future growth? Will this allow us to better interact with the guest? And how does it? Right? Answer the how for them so that they can make a better decision. So I'm really their support animal, right? To make sure that they can make the decisions with enough information.
So the interesting thing about this is you get these deja vu moments where you just sort of think about, boy, things have really changed here. And what I've heard is, in the old days, whenever that was, the IT guys were always behind the marketing people who came up with promotions and stuff, told them at the last minute you had to figure out how to program something. Now what we're hearing is that what I just heard is that almost every initiative that a company wants to take to drive their business forward is going to have to be a partnership between IT and also marketing, because marketing realizes that since most of the applications and things they're doing, and most of them are personalization, one-to-one with their customers and what they want to do, and staff too, HR, that there's going to be data, and they also know the value of a data breach, or what the impact is on their business. And so, whereas in the old days, somebody might have said the IT department sitting there looking at governance and figuring out what's going on is the group that says no to everything. No, you're actually the group that says yes to everything, because you're showing them the way and how to do it. And that's like a totally different perspective, of why, Jon, they're working together.
Exactly. No, I think it's important. One of the things as I'm seeing the questions come through, I think it kind of ties back to some of this. There have been a couple of questions about security, and David said, kind of for him, when he's sitting next to marketing, security is really key. It looks like one of the questions is about what are the most common security vulnerabilities, right? As we talked about earlier in this, almost everything in a retail store is connected these days. And every one of those network endpoints is a security vulnerability. And so just, adding more and more connected stuff in your store is creating more and more risk and vulnerability. And so ensuring that you have a totally secure networking environment is absolutely essential. And it allows you to then, if you're connecting them to a secure network environment and maintaining that level of security, it allows you to experiment with stuff and trust that you're not, putting a pinhole in your firewall. As soon as you put one pinhole in your firewall, oh, we'll make an exception this once, and then you make it again, and then you make it again, and suddenly, you only need one pinhole for something to get out. It's like a fishbowl that's got a leak. Eventually the water's going to come out. So I think these extra endpoints and this additional connectivity demand that's on the store, and these creative ideas that marketing departments come up with, they do create risk. I think it's really, what David said is spot on in terms of IT being really focused on ensuring that connectivity. And we as a network vendor, our priority is security as well, so that we can make it easy for David to say yes to marketing on those ideas that they come up with.
But it's the word platform gets used a lot by the application groups, and nobody actually really understands what that means, because it's like AI, everybody's got a different definition of it. But in reality, from what Mako is providing, you really are a platform to build on. You know that you need to have a safe base, which takes a big check mark off the table, as David has to respond and marketing wants to drive certain things that are out there. David did very quietly put in there somewhere, after he talked about help desks and call centers and stuff, he talked about his IT staff being a small staff. With all of these things going on, and Jon, I'm going to put this out to you, all these things going on, if you have a lean, small, local staff, and I say local, maybe they're remote staff that are out there, how does somebody, stay up and stay resilient? It's a question that somebody sent us when you have a major outage.
Yeah, I think, again, it goes back to ensuring, number one, having consistent and standardized, processes and systems so that you can actually identify the root cause of things. If you have a hodgepodge of different things that are all daisy chained together and something goes wrong, how do you pinpoint where the breakdown was and how do you identify the root cause if you have to kind of wade through everything? And what we often see with people who have a variety of networking and connectivity systems in their stores is as soon as something bad happens, the finger pointing starts between the different vendors. And if you have a single and consistent architecture where you can get remote visibility down to the port level of, what exactly happened here, that gives you the chance to immediately identify what the problem was, get yourself back up and running. I also think, we've seen more and more. You mentioned about a cloud outage. What we are seeing an increasing shift towards is, everyone went from on-prem to the cloud, and now we're seeing things come back
Right.
the other way, and we're seeing this increasing prevalence of edge computing where, I mean, and you talked, David, about AI and machine learning and all this type of stuff. One of the big applications that we're seeing people do at their retail facilities is processing, instead of processing CCTV footage by sending it to the cloud and then getting it back, because they're now layering on all these sort of AI things where it's integrating with point of sale kind of transactional data and, with the
They need the
camera.
information right away.
Yeah, you need to be able to process it quickly. And so having the power to do that computing at the edge and then only on a periodic basis pushing it up to the cloud, maybe for storage, is kind of the future of where we're going. And so, we are seeing more and more demand for that. We're kind of releasing some products that are enabling, greater capacity for edge computing. David, we should probably talk about those. But it's really where things are going, I think, is, people need it instantaneously. They need it to happen at greater scale as more and more of this processing capacity is required on site, to make decisions and to act on all the data that's being collected.
Well, David, it sounds like, you said that it wasn't just POS, it was a major, implementation that you did, and you were talking about boards and you were talking about all the different things that you put in at one time. Sounds like you were setting yourself up for being able to handle these new things as you go forward, and computing power down at the unit level, because it might be needed on demand.
No, that's absolutely right. And it comes back to that standardization term that I used earlier, because one of the key things was as soon as it's standardized, then you can build a support model to handle it, and you can build the technology to, if it's using it just one way, then you've only got one problem to solve when you have issues. First off, I mean, it's not if, but when. It's technology. You're going to have issues. You're going to have outages. But how do you best, like Jon said, how do you root cause it quickly? How do you get back up and running, have the least amount of impact? Whether it's, if it's a cloud POS and they have an outage, or they did something in their maintenance window, and you have policies around what you're passing through for that connectivity, and there was an issue there. Well, you're fixing it one time, and that's what we want to do. We want to fix something one time, right? Fix something one time and move on, because then you're much more successful, and that's the least amount of impact, right? And it goes back to the other thing we have in place by utilizing, multiple products of Mako, is auditing, right? So we audit all of our ports. We have a standardized port list for, where the POS plugs in, where the printers plug in, where the digital menu boards plug in, all of those different things. And if those things get out of sync, and a store goes down, oh, well, we pretty much know exactly what happened. Even our level one help desk knows, hey, why isn't this in port one? It's in port nine, and port nine is not open to you. Those types of things. So, in other words, root causing those issues very quickly from a standardization helps tremendously, because you tend to have less and less issues as it hardens.
Just to add on to that, I think obviously responding quickly when something bad does happen, and being able to root cause diagnose is critical. But we feel a huge amount of responsibility to ensure that we have the appropriate levels of redundancy, built into our systems to ensure that those root cause analyses happen as infrequently as possible, because there are no outages. And one of the ways that we think about that, David mentioned, the kind of cellular failover built into the firewall to ensure that if the ISP does go down, you can kind of kick over immediately to a backup plan. But then also with respect to pushing data out to, from the site to where it needs to go, whether it's a payment processor or a loyalty processor or whatever it may be. We've built a sophisticated architecture to enable us to directly connect to some of these, endpoints that prevents the need for a sort of central data center to manage the data and push it out again. And the fewer hops data has to make, the more likely you will have a resilient architecture and redundancy built in, because of the fact that there are just less places for it to kind of fail. So
But I'm gonna guess that ahead of time, even before David and his team and your other clients, you're able to also point out things to them they may not, may not be seeing as well.
Exactly. Yep. So we take that responsibility very seriously. Security and redundancy as a network vendor are really the things that keep us up at night, because that's ultimately what's going to drive our customers' business.
Now, I'll share one more thing, Rob, before I'm sure we're going to talk about something else. But one last thing related to that is you say, how do you notify, right? And by setting up the right type of notifications within that product, we're able to notify our help desk. Our help desk. So let me give you a real world example that a lot of restaurant companies run into. You may have, for us, there was this issue we had where, so we have game rooms and buffet, right? And at night, a lot of people power down their game rooms because that runs a lot of electricity and there's no reason to keep those things running overnight. Well, but what happened with one of our restaurants was we were finding that every night and every morning at like 7 o'clock, we were getting notifications, system totally offline, right? Well, and it was from the Mako, and so it would tell our level ones, and they would be able to proactively reach out to the franchisee or to the store and say, "Hey, your system's down. You guys are going to be opening in a few hours. What can we do to help you? We don't see, we can't see anything on the network, blah, blah, blah." Right. So, but what we were able to find out is, oh, well, that he powered down his game room and it just happened to be on the same breaker as the firewall. Right. And so by root causing that, we were able to, hey, everybody, don't put it on the same breaker, your network as well as your game rooms, because you really need your network to stay up so that we can get all the alerts that we have that are real.
Well, we have a few minutes left here, and both of you have mentioned sort of the future, and in all fairness, Jon, I did ask David sort of what was he thinking about going forward, but I didn't really ask you, sort of the game plan or the roadmap for where Mako sees both itself and the industry and what it's going to be offering next 12 to 18 months, what that message is for the industry.
Yeah, I think it ties back to a little bit of what I was talking about earlier with the increasing prevalence of AI-driven applications and the fact that this is going to be done at the edge. So we are shifting more to edge computing capabilities and trying to also at the same time virtualize networking equipment to the extent possible. The key, I think, is for stores to have less hardware but more functionality. I think people want to have the flexibility and the autonomy to deploy whatever technology they choose, and they want to be able to enable it and disable it, if it meets the needs of their business and it meets the needs of their customers and employees who are the users of all of it. And so for us, the key is how do we get as much relevant horsepower onto a single device as we can to unlock the technology potential that is kind of, I think, latent there with all these retail facilities that are looking to deploy tech to improve their customer and guest and employee experiences. So,
but people are going to tack more and more, into their pipe at the unit level, and I don't want to forget, that David asked you that question. He sort of put you on the spot as to connecting with the guest and the customer. But when you think about it, we're not probably too far off before we have bring your own device with management, with employees. Then you have all these third-party services, drivers and pickup, they're all connecting in as well into it. And so the connection points, besides where we started this conversation with equipment and different applications and stuff, are just going to increase.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
Probably the future, right?
Facilitating the management of all of that securely, reliably, and in a way that ultimately achieves the promised performance of the technology is really key.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, when you speak of the employees and the operators utilizing being on the same network or utilizing those same tools and going out to these different sites and things like that, one of the other things we from a security standpoint, for everybody who has an email in our system uses MFA, right? So that's the first line of defense, right? We also have a security awareness training program that we send out set training sessions, from a tool, every couple of weeks to everybody in our system. You have to continue to teach your system and continue to educate everybody on the risks that are out there because they change daily. Right. And so this isn't necessarily related to Mako, but it's related to restaurants, and it's related around educating your people, not only in their work environment, but in their daily environment, right? That you've got to have security awareness for all of these different things nowadays. My wife hates, that she has to log into 4 different things and keep up with passwords. And then now she's got two-token authentication and she wants to throw her computer into the fireplace. And I'm like, well, I was like, you got a choice, honey.
You always have those things, but as you think about it, I think that we are probably underestimating the amount of data and complexity that's going forward and that's going to go through back and forth. And the reason I'd say that is if you really start to think about all of this connected equipment and this equipment thinking on its own, I only think to go log on to an application when I think about doing the application. I only think to go check on, the status of something that I use when I'm using it. But this equipment and the customers and the background systems and the analysis are operating all the time, and they're getting smarter. So they're going to constantly be transmitting more and more data we're probably not even thinking about.
Yep.
So that is sort of, our future. So we've just got really a minute or so left here, and I'm just sort of curious. So if there's some, final thoughts, and Jon, I'm going to start with you on this, but just a couple of thoughts of things that you really do think that this industry needs to be thinking about, and also things that you have learned from Cici's and working with David and his team.
I mean, I think that, the thing that industry needs to be thinking about are the things that David's thinking about with respect to security. It's going to be an increasing concern. And I think, one of the other questions that came through was how do you highlight the importance of cybersecurity to people that are maybe less tech savvy, like franchisees and store employees and all of that. You just have to really beat that security drum constantly. And it is, as David said, a people-based thing as well, and it's a cultural thing within your organization to make sure that it's prioritized, because it's the threats that are out there in the cyber world are becoming increasingly sophisticated. They're using AI to hack in. I mean, you can't predict where the threats are going to come from. So I think keeping security top of mind is really, really important moving forward into this age of kind of unprecedented technology capabilities.
Great. And David, you get the last word on this, the learnings that you've gotten in your relationship with Mako, and also just the parting thoughts you want to leave our audience with that you want to make sure they remember from this conversation.
Sure. Find a partner that has the same, belief in what they want to do as what you're looking to solve for. Make sure it's not transactional, make sure it's strategic. That's one thing I'll say from a partnership standpoint. From a technical standpoint, solution for what your needs are, right? So when we built our tech stack, we wanted a very small footprint, but we wanted the ability to be agile, and that's what we have today. But put the security and support controls make sure those are front and foremost, because those are the things that help you be successful and allow your team to do the things that they're really good at outside of the support, right? Because that's how you take a company forward, is to be able to take on those additional technology projects that can, build that ROI, create those cost savings, all of those different things. So that's the main thing I would focus on, and I hope that people take away today.
Well, great. Listen, I want to thank both of you, for joining in on this conversation. I got to tell you, I learned a lot from it. I've got some talking points, by the way, for all the conferences that are coming up now. And so you might hear me quoting you guys on that as well. I also would point out that on the Mako website, there's a white paper that they put out on the relationship with CCs and what that journey looked like. And you might want to download and take a look at that. And I'm certainly sure that we'll all be running into people in our industry over the next few months, but that you can reach out to Jon or David, if you have some further conversation, because we all learn from these conversations. So I want to thank both of you for joining in the conversation today, and Mako for being a great industry partner of the IFBTA and helping to bring this forward. And, I wish everybody a great Labor Day, and also look forward to seeing people as we go forward. Thank you for joining us.